her lecture is An Anthropologist's Gaze on Fashion, the Poetics and Practice of a Human Universal. So I'm really happy to present Noelle Gazzano to you, and she's going to tell us all about anthropology and fashion. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, actually. I think I'm gonna grab this because I tend to walk around a lot when I lecture. Does this work? Yeah. So, thank you for the great introduction. I was actually talking with Patricia earlier, and I asked her, I wonder if they know what an anthropologist is. Do you know who an anthropologist? Oh, it works. Do you know who an anthropologist is, or what an anthropologist does? Sort of, maybe. Those adventurous people that travel the world and try to study exotic customs and weird things and rituals, right? That kind of thing. So my tribe is the fashion system. Instead of traveling to Australia or who knows where, I study the fashion system. So I'm an anthropologist of fashion. And here I feel that I have to explain to you a moment what I understand fashion to be. I think that in order for you to get the most out of my lecture, you should think that we can look at fashion in two different ways. We can, if you think the word fashion, like little visualization experiment, think the word fashion. What image comes to mind? Fashion, boom, image. Runway, thank you. Usually, my students tell me that the images that come to mind are clothing, shoes, accessories, runway models, some kind of brand, generally luxury goods. So, if you think about it, clothing and luxury goods are often the image that we have of fashion. What I'm going to propose to you today is that this is a very narrow way of looking at fashion. Now, of course, we've learned to look at fashion that way. The way that we understand fashion is cultural. It's learned from our environment. But to understand fashion in a more complex way, you can think that it's not only the fashion system, which means all the people that participate in producing fashion and us as consumers of the so-called fashion system, but you can think that fashion is actually an action that we all perform every day, and that really all human beings perform and have always performed in all times and places way before the fashion system even existed. Since prehistory, we've been modifying our bodies in order to say, I exist, I am, this is who I am. We've been modifying our bodies with body painting, with tattoos, with all sorts of pearls and decorations, and the most amazing thing is that it is likely that we were decorating our bodies before we actually had verbal language as we know it today. We probably used fashion and art as modes of expression before we had verbal language as we know it today. Now that pretty much blows my mind because it makes me think that fashion is something really important that characterizes us as human beings. Have you ever thought of that? That we're the only animals that do this kind of weird thing of decorating our bodies? I mean, it's not just about it's chilly out, so you wear a coat. Yeah, but why that beautiful, coat with little squares that you're wearing, or the jacket, or the pea coat, or that fuchsia little coat that I see over there? Why not just the blanket? In the summer, we go to the beach with a bathing suit. Why that amazing, cute little bathing suit and not just whatever? Why a bathing suit? We decorate our bodies to say things. Fashion is an incredible and extraordinary mode of communication. We talk about who we are with this non-verbal language, which is extremely creative. And as a visual artist, I realized over time that the way that I modify my body to express who I am is tightly connected to the way I modify a canvas by painting to express how I am. It was actually thanks to my students, thanks to my anthropology of fashion students, because one day they came to my studio and they told me, oh my goodness, you dress the same colors of your paintings. It could have been even the other way around, you paint the same way that you dress. And then another day, I invited some other students over. I had just finished a painting. They looked at me and I was wearing really the same colors that I had just painted on the canvas. So obviously, color, shape, they're very much human things that we use to express who we are. And this experience that I have as a human being, like my personal experience of using fashion and using art, this experience is at the root of my research as an anthropologist. So what I would like to present to you today is an exploration of the connections that exist between fashion and art. On both sides, on one hand, an exploration of the connections between fashion and art in the fashion system. So I'm going to tell you about artists and designers that have collaborated over time, artists that have used fashion as their visual language, designers that have been inspired by artists or collaborated with artists. But I'm also going to then take you on a voyage back in time, all the way in prehistory, to talk about the connections between fashion and art in human evolution. And the theoretical framework that I'm going to propose is that if we understand this connection between art and fashion in the fashion system and in human evolution, this can shed a lot of light on what fashion is for us today. So, just very quick, this is just to show you a little bit more who I am. And this is my website if you're interested in looking at my artwork. It's noelgazzano.com is my artwork, and it's always extremely colorful. And I recently got invited to write a fashion blog, which is pretty cool because I don't think that we should only us academics, we shouldn't just publish in academic journals. It's really interesting, in my opinion, if we can share our understanding in a straightforward way with as many people as we can, in a curious way and a fun way. And so I got invited to develop a blog, and so I developed The Anthropologist in Fashion Land, and it's also, it's not finished yet. You see, some of the pages are just, okay, page C, page D, because I literally just launched it last week. But if you're interested, in reading about it, it's also on Facebook. There's links there. So I would like to start talking about. Can you hear me? Which is better? I guess this. It's the same. I'd like to start talking about artists that have used fashion language, that have used fashion production technologies and fashion materials as their artistic language. Obviously, there's a huge wealth of artists that have done so, and I'm going to show you two examples from two very different times in the history of art. So I'm going to start with the movement called Futurism. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's a movement in the early 1900s in Italy. And I'm going to end with a contemporary artist whose name is Yinka Shonibare, and he is British Nigerian. And I picked these two artists. I'm going to talk about Balla from the Futurist movement, Giacomo Balla, and Yinka Shonibare. And I picked these two artists because they're very distant in time, and they do completely different work with really different meaning, but they're great examples of how visual artists, performance artists have used fashion as a language to communicate their message as artists. So, who knows about Futurism as an artistic movement? Some of us? I love this. This is my favorite. This is like the universal for, kind of, a little bit. I can't decide which one I want to use, because then so, Futurism. Futurism was a movement in the early 1900s, and here you see the Manifesto Tecnico della Pittura Futurista, which is the technical manifesto of futurist painting. And it was signed by all these artists, Boccioni, Carrà, Russolo, Balla, and Severini. It's from 1910. And if you look at their artwork, you'll probably immediately notice, we're going to analyze Giacomo Balla in particular, you'll probably immediately notice that it is an attempt to represent in two dimensions movement. Can you see that? How there's this sense of like velocity, speed, movement? Can you see that? Yeah, a little bit? Here, for example, here you can see it even more. It's almost as if from left It's almost as if from left to right, you see someone running. Did you notice that? So the idea was that these artists wanted to represent speed, velocity, technology, the thrill of the changes of the new industrial society. You have to think, early 1900s, people were fascinated with the cars, the automobile. It was something so new. This is completely alien to us today, right? We don't really have this fascination, but you have to think, imagine cars were not very common. Speed, velocity, technology. Technology meant mechanics. It's not like technology today, okay? Your iPhone, your iPad, it's a completely different thing. So they tried to represent in 2 dimensions this ideal of modernity. Here you have another great example. And I'm showing you artwork from the early, 1913, 1914, 1918, okay, by Giacomo Balla, because it is exactly in these years that Balla experimented with creating also garments. So I'm going to show you how he used garments, and also he created actually also furniture and design. So garments, accessories, furniture, and paintings. He used all these different media, but the message was the same. It was always this incredible exaltation of speed and velocity. And I think that the most fascinating aspect is that you'll see an amazing coherence in terms of the language that he uses. Even if on one hand it's a painting, on the other hand it's a dress, and then you'll see a little like a stool, like a bench, you can tell that it's always the same artist, that it's always almost the same visual language, except that it's using completely different material. In this sense, it reminds me of Picasso, who of course could go from, painting amazing canvases to creating ceramics, but it was always him. He always had the same strong identity that he managed to convey in all these different ways. So here you have a little bit, a lighter, okay, less strong painting. I think that it's interesting how he painted even over the frame in this case. But again, look at the signature, okay? The signature here is Balla, and his name was Balla. That was his last name. But he then changed, this is from 1918, he changed his signature to Futur Balla, future Balla. So even in his signature, he literally changed his name in order to convey this same idea that he tried to convey with his artwork. I like this a lot, this piece right here, because it's a study. And I find that studies have, especially in painting, they have a spontaneity that often, like the finished piece doesn't have. And so I was really happy to find a study by Giacomo Balla. The colors are really pretty. They're very bright. They look great on a print. Don't you think they'd look amazing? Here you have another piece by Balla, and it's interesting because right here you see the signature, Futur Balla. You can read it even a little bit more. So pessimism and optimism. And again, you can see how he tried to render emotional states using these geometrical forms and always conveying a very strong sense of like dynamic nature and movement. And here we move to totally different way of expressing himself, because this is a garment that he drew. And I would like you to take a moment to look at this drawing of a garment, of a suit, and then think about the artwork. Do you see how really it's the same? How it's the drawing of a suit, but it's such a similar visual language? I find that fascinating. And it's not only because of the print on the textile. The actual shape of the suit is like the artwork. Look, it's asymmetrical. You see, left and right are different. Look at this fantastic cut here. And the curve and the straight line. And one leg rounded, the other pointy, the same over here. Look at the top. Okay, so it's not just the decoration, it's also the actual pattern of the suit. Now, in order to understand how he could go from having certain thoughts and emotions and feelings and ideas and a certain ideology and painting this, and how he could instead have those same ideas and create garments, we have to read this part. So who reads Italian here? Okay, everyone's like, restaurant menu, okay? All right, so I'll translate it for you. So in this Manifesto Futurista, okay, so the Futurist Manifesto, the name is the Anti-Neutrality Suit. What does it mean? Why anti-neutrality? Now, I'm not using the work by the futurists because I agree with the ideas behind their work, okay? I'm using the work by futurists because they are a great example of how you can use the same visual language applied to fashion and art. In particular, I definitely personally disagree with the message here because anti-neutral was anti-neutrality, so interventionist in where? In the war. In the World War, in the First World War. Okay? So the idea was that this had to be a suit that expressed these artists' idea that Italy should enter the war in order to express its strength and its identity as a nation. Okay? So this is not something that we necessarily agree with. But let's see how they managed to render that idea into fashion. Today, we want to abolish all the neutral tints that are cute, okay, that are humiliating, they say. All the tints and styles that are like old, the stripes, the little squares, the diplomatic dots, the mediocre equilibrium, the so-called good taste. We want to abolish the harmony of colors and shapes that block enthusiasm and slow down people. We want to abolish symmetry of cut, static lines that make people tired, depressed, and make our muscles all tight. We want to abolish basically uniformity in patterns, useless buttons, little, collars. So us futurists, we want to liberate, well, here they say race, they mean human beings, from all neutrality, from the frightened lack of decision and the being quiet, from pessimism and inertia, so lack of movement. Okay, so apart from what we think about this specific idea, but it is interesting that these ideas were rendered with this visual style. So I think that it is very effective. I think that this style, this pattern, and the actual cut of the suit, the textile, do manage to represent somehow these ideas. And I find that extremely interesting. And this is another drawing by Balla. It's a dress, and we are very lucky because I'm going to skip forward, we can actually see it made. Okay, so this is what it looked like. So once again, apart from how we feel about the actual message, which, as I say, I disagree with, but I have to recognize that the suit's amazing. And look at these vests. You can't see them well, but this is all an incredibly detailed embroidery. And I love colors, and it just looks great. It looks fantastic. And here I have another photo for you in which you can enjoy the buckle. Look at that buckle. How amazing even the colors of the buckle are, like the colors and it's not a pattern, they're all pieces stitched together. So let's go back real quick, and do you see how I always love to go from the image of the sketch done by the artist to then see the actual dress? Isn't that cool? And here you see some more drawings of his, and again, the asymmetry in the cut, again, the differences, okay, rounded here, pointy, the use of colors, and it reminded me of a suit that I saw. It's reminding me now from a suit that I just saw recently. I don't remember in which boutique in the center of Florence, but it was really similar, and it was made of some fantastic black wool, but this part was made with insertions of plastic, and it was an extremely expensive suit. I don't remember which boutique it was, but it was really interesting because it had these added details of color with these asymmetrical cuts in this section, and it was like like rubbery plastic material, like turquoise and bright green. And this is probably, of all the various drawings, this is probably my favorite. I really like how it's so dynamic, and it reminds me of like a forest, I don't know, like plants. It's really cool in my opinion. I like this a lot. And here you have how you have an exhibition, of course, and again, the dress. This is fantastic. Giacomo Bella even designed bags. Now, I could definitely walk around with a bag like that. I'd totally wear it. And look how fantastic the colors are, and the patterns, and all the movement, even in the straps up here. Even his signature was so dynamic. And you see the years are always, 1914, 16, 18. And here we are in the realm of design, okay? And so I'm sure that you can recognize, although the photos aren't that great, but you can recognize still, again, the fact that these little, punk up, like bench stool, okay, the shape of the stool itself, and also the decoration actually are very similar to the artwork. And I'm going to just go back very quick, like look at this image, hold on to it, okay? Hold on to it. And look at that. You see what I mean? It's really, really similar. Okay, so you've got the curvy parts, like in the optimist side of the painting with all the turquoise and blue, but then you've got also the rough angles, like in the pessimistic side. So, it is, in my opinion, extremely interesting to see the fact that certainly for all the 1900s and up to today, there are artists that there have been artists that have used fashion as their language. So they've painted canvases, they've made sculptures, but they've also made garments that aren't simply made to be worn just like any suit, but they're intended as conceptual works of art. And so what was the idea behind this garment? The idea was that the artist recognized the power that fashion has. Because while a canvas hangs on a wall, fashion's on our skin. It has such a more powerful impact on us because it is in direct contact with our body. It's extremely intimate. The experience of fashion is extremely intimate. So if you create a garment that's not just, let's say, comfortable or decorative, but you take it a step further and create a garment that has actually some kind of meaning embedded into it, you transform it in art that can be worn on the body, and so it will have a very powerful impact on the people that wear it and on the people that see that person wearing it. This was the idea behind this suit. And I find this idea to be still valid. Of course, we can argue that there are artists that are better than others and that manage to convey their messages better than others. There's fashion designers that are better than others. Of course, it takes talent to be able to create a garment that's a conceptual garment that can actually be worn, but that also makes a statement. Like, it takes talent, it takes creativity, but it's totally possible. And now we're moving in time, like 80 years, okay? And this is Yinka Shonibare. And if you Google him, you'll see that he's like the coolest looking guy ever. He has this amazing smile and these dreadlocks. And in all his photos, he's always like jiggling his head so that the dreadlocks are like that, like waving. And he uses fashion techniques to create art, because he literally makes dresses. That's not just what he does. He also is an amazing visual artist, but he is famous for his incredible art installations that use, you see, these very sophisticated garments. Can you imagine that this is an installation? Is this whimsical? Is it amazing? Beautiful? So, I would like you to pay a little bit of attention and notice what characterizes these garments. Okay, I'll show you maybe a couple more. So here you see the actual garments, and here you see the installations that he does. All right, another installation. So let's use this photo because given that the garments are just placed on mannequins in a straightforward way, this is not how his artwork is displayed usually, okay? Usually his garments are displayed in these incredible installations that are like tableaux vivants. So they create an actual scene, something is happening. But look at the design, look at the pattern, look at the textile that is being used. Do you notice that there's something a little off? Something a little off, isn't there? I mean, these dresses, the shape is pretty European, isn't it? But the textile, this looks like those African textiles, doesn't it? Do you see what I'm saying? Doesn't it look like that? And that's exactly his point. He uses textiles from the south and east of the world to create garments designed following the style of Western, so-called Western fashion. Okay? Historic, of course. So what is the concept behind it? Well, the concept is that this whimsicality that you see, this like sweet poeticness, is just the surface. Then if you pause and think about it, you can realize that what he's doing here is trying to reflect on the relationship between colonial power and the colonized in the context of a post-colonial world. I'll repeat that. By juxtaposing textile made by